Hey, folks, welcome to a very special episode of the Distortion Den, where this week I'm bringing on a good pal of mine, the one and only Mr. Martin Popoff. Martin, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me, Derek. It's very cool. Any
Yeah,
any any day talking about ACDC is a good time. So
it's a good time. And hey, folks, just so you know, check the ticker on the bottom. You can hit up Martin at his website, martinpopoff.com. He has a bunch of stuff on there. He has his books. He has links to his history in 5 songs. He has paintings, ebooks, audiobooks. He's got everything there. It's basically one-stop shopping. And as I always tell everybody, it's about supporting local and supporting fellow Canucks. So hit Martin up. So our purpose here, as Martin already said, is this hardcover coffee table book, ACDC at 50, which dropped a few months ago, I guess now, Martin?
yeah.
And how's the book been doing for you?
Pretty good. It's been fairly well regarded. I mean, it is what it is. There are other ACDC books out there that do other things and better things and different things. But yeah, this is essentially a super nice coffee table book. That's for sure. Like the layout and the pictures and the memorabilia, live shots and stuff is really good. And then for the text, the whole idea, this is an idea of the publishers. And I've done a Bowie at 75 book, and I've got a Kiss at 50 coming. But yeah, the idea was ACDC at 50. Yeah, there you go. Basically, come up with 50 career milestones, highlights, whether they're happy ones or sad ones, whatever. And just write about them and, try to keep it succinct, try to stay within the word count and just, not count them down, but just do them chronologically throughout.
Yeah. And I also have to mention what I always love about your books is your introduction. And this ACDC one is no exception. I love how you discovered ACDC. I want you to tell, if you don't mind, telling that story of when you stumbled across Let There Be Rock, because you got into ACDC a good 3 years earlier before the rest of us got into the band with Back in Black. So give us the lowdown on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, people could have got into there earlier than me, but I mean, so the idea was we were on a family vacation across Canada in the big, the army green Dodge camper van, and we would do these epic family vacations where you'd stay in a hotel half the time you'd stay in the van. It was family of 4, right? So yeah, I was 14. So pulled in and rolled into Winnipeg and was in a Kelly's, I think it was. And I remember, I can even still picture it now, just what the racks looked like and the store looked like. And I remember picking up Let There Be Rock and looking at it and thinking, well, they're called ACDC. That's pretty heavy. This logo looks kind of a little old. They don't look like they're rocking out on the front cover too particularly much. Look at the song titles. There's this weird looking kid on the back cover, and look at the song titles, and they're okay, but they're not over the top. One's got Boogie in the title, and I'm thinking, how heavy is this going to be? How good is this going to be? Right. So just took a risk on it. Didn't know who they were. And I can never remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure I bought High Voltage, our Canadian copy of High Voltage, North American copy, at the same time in the same store, I think. And then we carried on the trip and then got home 2 weeks later or whatever it was and played it. And I remember thinking, this is a lot dumber than Sad Wings of Destiny, that's for sure. And not as cool as Black Sabbath, and not as heavy as Sabbath, and not as sophisticated as Deep Purple and blah blah blah. But still loved it. And the interesting thing was that every single song was heavy, which was a new thing for us. And I always tell the story that Rainbow Rising is the first thing where everything was heavy. And then around this time, same year, 77, the Sex Pistols album, everything was heavy. And those were the first 3 where everything was heavy. Motorhead, everything's heavy. And then the next 2, Motorhead, even heavier. And those that makes almost the suite of all the 70s albums that had nothing mellow on them at all. We liked that as kids too, as well.
Well, for sure. And I also, one part of your introduction that I really liked is the day you got Power Age And,
Right.
that just reading stuff like that just can take anybody who's bought music over the years, that memory. I mean, you put it perfectly. Getting Power Age, strapping it to the back of your bike, hoping that the vinyl wasn't going to melt in the heat. Get home, you pull it out, and it was red vinyl. Like, talk about a bonus score, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and for me and my buddies, I mean, we were 13 when Back in Black came out, so we bought it at Record on Wheels here in Thunder Bay, and there's about 5 of us, and we went down, we bought it, brought it home, and within a half hour, we're all phoning each other. The whole shipment skipped. So all our Back in Black records went back, and then, being 13 and wanting to hear it, we kept calling Record on Wheels every day. Is it in yet? Is it in yet? Is it in yet? I think we almost drove the guy to have a nervous breakdown, but he finally got another shipment in, and it was all fine. But yeah, so there's my first memory of ACDC.
Yeah.
Back
What
in
did
Black.
you ever, maybe this is a touchy topic, but what do you ever remember about Records on Wheels being like associated with biker gangs or something? Did you ever hear those rumors?
Well, unfortunately, the shop here in Thunder Bay was probably only here for 2 to 3 years, and it was just basically another go-to visit on the weekends. I don't ever recall seeing any biker gangs unless I was just too focused walking in that store looking for rock. But I just remember it was just basically me and my buddies. I don't even know if even Thunder Bay had a biker crowd back then. I'm sure we did, but I was just young and foolish. So that's interesting, though. I never heard that before.
It's a fascinating concept, because there were a lot of these records chains in the States that were, I think, associated with drug dealing. Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I think some of them have kind of shady ownership at the top, kind of thing, and that bleeds into the whole thing about the whole seaminess of the cutout industry and the mob be involved in that sort of stuff. And I mean, the music industry in general just has a lot of shadiness in it, various parts of the distribution chain.
Yeah, no kidding. And I know we had a shady record store here in town, but I'm not going to out it publicly. I'll tell you off the side, but because I could be way off base. But to my eyes, at a young age, I thought, kind of shady store. But hey, they got records, so I'm okay with that. Yeah. So when you were putting this book together, your 50 points at ACDC, how many did you originally start with? Like, were you at 75, 100 points, and then you said, okay, I gotta.
That's the funnest part of the whole job. I mean, people are surprised when I say that. They think that would be the hard part, but soon as you get the go ahead and it's time to go, that's the first thing I dive into, right? I want to see what I'm going to have to write about here, right? So one thing that we try to do is, depending on the band, well, actually all of the ones I've done so far, you include every studio album, so you get that down, and then there's just super obvious things too, like deaths and depending on the band, like ACDC definitely included every live album because there weren't a lot of live albums. So I think with all of them we included all the live albums. But so you do that, you see what you got left. No, you just work along the way. I don't recall being way over or way under or anything like that. It was just nicely coming in at about that. But I think, the smart thing to do if you got to make a list like that is because it's all chronological anyways, you just bang them all in priority. You just put your cursor wherever in order, and you start banging them in, like all the ones got to go in for sure. And then, along the way you count, we're at 37. We're at 45. Okay, I only got 5 left, right? What would they be? And then so as you have fewer left, also the priority goes way down, right? And then maybe you're even struggling for the last 1 or 2.
Yeah, that's the great thing about this book is you broke it down into basically 4 parts. Part 1 being Bonfire, which deals with all the Bon Scott era, and then part 2, which is Geordie, which deals with Brian Johnson coming in. Part 3, which is the legacy of ACDC, and part 4, which is about Malcolm. And as we all know, Malcolm was a huge clog in the ACDC bus, so to speak. I mean, I think he basically had a firm grip on that band, especially when it came to getting rid of management in the early 80s. I mean, they seemed to be just rifling through, I think it was 4 or 5 managers in the span of 5-6 years. I mean, that's a that's a pretty stressful.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that whole story. I probably shouldn't say too much about it because
No,
I
that's
mean,
okay.
David Krebs is a good buddy of mine, so he's
Yeah.
told me the whole story, and yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, they were hard-nosed business guys. Generally speaking, I mean, I don't think there's anything I can't tell, but I mean, generally speaking, those guys kind of just watching how the brothers did in the Easy Beats and just what the industry was like in Australia had a pretty strong suspicion of things, and they always were like a circle the wagons band, kind of secretive, ran everything sort of in-house. So it's almost a band if you can abstractly picture it. I mean, Malcolm kind of was the manager at a certain level of the band, and then there's management above that. So and then accountants is a whole nother thing. So it's like, in an abstract way, in my discussions with David about it, it's almost like, and funnily enough, this is kind of like the same story with Scorpions in that there's almost like three parties involved, it seems. And that's the band, the management, and the accountants. So you got a large accounting firm, and you've got a large management situation, and then you've got the band. And it seemed like there can be conflicts and adversarial relationships between those three in some of these big organizations.
Yeah, and there we go. There's ACDC at, I guess you could even say they were kind of like a biker gang. You were either in with them,
yeah,
you were out with them, and as we go through the book, like the Bon Scott years, I mean, Martin writes about Mark Evans leaving or fired, whatever the story was for that, and Cliff Williams coming in. He touches all the bases. The first ever ACDC US show. He also goes into, of course, the Mutt Lange era of ACDC, and everybody knows Highway to Hell, Back in Black, for those about to rock. Now, Martin, my question to you is, the day Back in Black came out, with you already 3 years invested into being an ACDC fan, what were your thoughts going back to 1980 upon hearing that? Not your thoughts in 2023, but 1980.
I just remember nobody was complaining about the idea that here they are coming out with a new singer. I think everybody was happy with the new singer, happy with the new album. Mm-hmm. I remember most of us, me and my buddies, were shocked at You Shook Me All Night Long. We weren't happy with that song, but the whole rest of the album was perfectly fine. It was a huge hit in high school. Everybody loved it. It was the massive party album. Like, I just remember, it was just something playing while people were just drinking themselves stupid all the time. Right? It just always seemed to be the soundtrack to that. Right.
I think people are still doing that.
Yeah. And I remember, although most of them are quite a bit older, right? They're probably going to die if they're drinking themselves stupid, right? But and I remember, and I might have mentioned this in the intro, I think I did, but I remember it being a stereo test record when I was working at Rock Island Tape Center, right? And so I can picture that album sitting downstairs in the basement in the super high end stereo room, right? And us playing it all the time, and I remember it, trying to impress people by, you've got these massive JBLs and Serwin Vegas and Bose and clipped speakers down there, and these huge 160 watts per side and Yamaha amps and stuff. And I can still picture to this day, starting with the bells, and then the band kicks in and all that, and then people's eyes going wide. Whoa, that sounds good, right? Because we had this, one of those classic basement listening room dens, dark with carpet and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's a crazy memory, and that's the best thing about it. That's just a band really taking off like a rocket, and so many of us, like myself included, my friends, we hopped on that ACDC bus, and then it was getting whatever we could get on ACDC, Let There Be Rock, Power Age, Highway to Hell, High Voltage. But then one interesting fact that I really dug in your book was the chapter where you wrote about when Dirty Deeds dropped in the middle of 1981, a year after Back in Black, but basically, I guess, a few months before For Those About to Rock, and the band wasn't too happy. Now, me as a young 13, 14-year-old at the time, I was ecstatic. Hey, more ACDC, but Fill us in on the gaps there, because there's a pretty cool story you wrote about in here about Phil Carson and all.
Yeah. The band wasn't too happy with that whole thing because it caused so much confusion, and it literally did cause confusion because, back then with no internet, it's like news was, about 9% as efficient as it is now. So I'm sure a lot of people are just confused about who is this singer on here. Doesn't quite sound like Brian Johnson. What's going on? And it had this, it also, the other problem with it, I think, now that I think about it, I've never really thought about it this way, but the album itself was you could tell it was quite a few years older. It's definitely rootsier, not as heavy and not as with it, and a little bit too much boogie rock and blues on it and whatnot. And the album cover was a notoriously bad Hypnosis album cover, just very confusing. It's like, what kind of band is this? Kind of artsy, kind of not, kind of artsy, kind of scrappy. The type styles were scrappy. So yeah, it caused some confusion, but I'm sure the guys look back with their business hat on and say, wow, this was kind of a good idea, because it was a massive hit. It did great. And gave them more hits as well. I mean, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap became one of their biggest songs, right? So had it come out at the time when it was done, it might not have done that well back then. I think they did a pretty good thing with having, the High Voltage album as a compilation being the first album, because, those first three, the Australian versions of the first three, Up and Down, are a little wobbly here and there, especially the debut High Voltage, Australian High Voltage. So that was pretty smart. Might have even been smarter to like, because even that sounded old once Let There Be Rock happened. So it might even been smarter to start with Let There Be Rock. But anyways, it all worked out in the end, as people figured out what was going on here. But yeah, the band gets accused of being, trading on Bond's death, and nobody knows that the band was against it, right?
Right.
Sort of thing, because that sort of stuff. I mean, the only way you're going to learn that is if one of them happens to say something like that in Hit Parade or Circus or Cream. Otherwise you're not going to know. And those guys, like I say, they're so guarded with what they say. It doesn't sound like something they're going to talk about. I might be wrong. Maybe they didn't talk about it back then, but anyways, yeah, it all worked out because it became a massive multi-platinum album. I don't know what it's at now, but I seem to recall 4 or 5 or 6 platinum, something like that. Maybe 7 times platinum in the States. It's a big album.
So, and it probably, I think, I don't want to quote you on this, but I think also it was stated that it affected the sales of For Those About to Rock as well, right? Or was that just down to maybe too much ACDC saturation at that time, do you think? Or
boy, I can't remember the story, and I don't know if we would ever know that answer.
Yeah.
What do you think I said? Did I say it made him go down or go up? Because it's like chicken and egg, right? You don't really know, right? So you would never know. So
just thinking, geez, I that's why I said I don't want to quote you.
Yeah,
I'm totally off base, but it was almost like for me as a fan, not enough ACDC, but maybe for others, it was like, wow, another album already. Well, I'll get it later, and then later becomes maybe never, or because I know I watched you on another show where you were discussing this topic, and you can look at any ACDC set list nowadays, and the big focus is always Back in Black. Right. And one song from For Those About to Rock, the title track, and the rest is kind of forgotten off that album, which to me is, For Those About to Rock is a pretty solid record. But being young at the time when For Those About to Rock came out, I remember asking a senior in high school, he was one of these dudes with the denim patches on the back, the Iron Maiden, the Def Leppard, the AC/DC. So I said, hey, what do you, make small talk with them, try to be cool. I said, hey, what do you think of that new AC/DC album? Sides 3 and 4 to Back in Black. What? I had no concept of that at the time. And I'm like, damn, you do have a point, but I liked it.
I remember getting it and like, so the music, finding it to be a safe and lighter and more commercial and rehashed version of Back in Black. So yeah, we were all disappointed, but I remember also looking at that album cover going, dumb front cover, dumb back cover, waste of waste of an opportunity for the gatefold. That wasn't very good. Thinking, it's starting to feel a little corporate. It's like you could tell that, they're just not doing that good, and they spent a little bit on, the embossing and the fact that it's gold, or like an actual metallic ink and all that stuff. But other than that, I just remember thinking, I just wish these guys would try harder with these album covers. And then thinking back going, hey, the album covers are never all that good with this band. And then they kind of got worse as time went on. This is notoriously a band without very good album covers.
Yeah, true. I mean, it's the logo that's everybody knows, right? And it's just basically the logo stamped on the record. They're lucky they have a cool logo. So, and then after the whole Mutt Lange area, and they supposedly weren't happy with them by the end of it, they go back to their raw sound, which was Flick of the Switch, which for many, including myself, is probably my favorite Johnson album. And I know you also hold it in high regard. You actually signed my book to Rising Power. So I thought, wow, how do you know that was my favorite album? So good on you.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I loved that album. I thought it was good and heavy, and it just gets me going. I love Guns for Hire. I love the slow stuff on it. I love the fast stuff on it. So it is totally my favorite. It would be my third favorite AC/DC album overall. After, I don't know which is higher, Power Age or Highway to Hell. I think today I'm going to go with Highway to Hell. I would say Highway to Hell, Power Age, than that one. And then they kind of tried to redo the same thing with Fly in the Wall, and it felt like Fly in the Wall was the second half of the slightly lesser, the same way For Those About to Rock was with Back in Black.
Yeah, and then of course they have the bounce back with Who Made Who, and Blow Up Your Video, which kind of took them up a little bit more, or maybe kept them level. And then of course Razor's Edge came out in 1990, and that just went off total bonkers. And the great thing about, also in the book, you talk to a friend of ours, the one and only Mr. Mike Fraser, who throws down some good quotes, because he's basically been, I think, their engineer since Razor's Edge album, and done everything since then for the band. So he's in that inner circle with them. So that was great, scoring some quotes out of him.
Yeah. And I did a podcast episode of my audio podcast, History in 5 Songs, which was the Go to Vancouver and Try Harder episode, right?
That's right.
There's all this pilgrimage to Vancouver to make your comeback album, to make the one where you're going to try hard again, right? So, because Fly in the Wall and Blow Up Your Video were considered creatively a little spent. And then this one, you got this great drum sound, which is either Bruce Fairbairn or Chris Slade. Who knows who gets the credit for that? But this good technical, hard hitting, slapping drum sound, and you just get better songs. Everything seems more urgent. They got the massive hit. I always compared that song to Who Made Who in a way. So Who Made Who as a song carried that whole album and brought it forward. And then here you get, and Are You Ready's great as well. Money Talks. There's just all the songs just seem, you get this weird little Christmas song on it. But so I don't know. It was definitely, it just seemed like, they got a good shot in the arm with that one, and they were back excited again.
Yeah. And I also have to mention, which I should have talked about when we were discussing Back in Black, is Martin actually talked to the guy who made the AC/DC bell. Everybody, the bell that drops during the show, Mr. Mike Milson, I believe. And he gives insight about the making of the bell. So, I mean, you get all this real great, cool backstory stuff in this book. I mean, we're just quickly going over the finer points, but everything that we discussed is in this book. And
I forgot about that. So what they like to do at Motor Books is you've got your 50, and then there's just these little a few little features along the way, and the bell is one of those.
Yeah, and of course, your book just keeps going forward. You get into the whole, Brian Johnson leaving the tour, Axel Rose coming in. What were your thoughts on Axel taking over the mic?
Well, first off, he did a great job. So he was really good. So it was entertaining, and he was on time and behaved and respectful and all that stuff. Like, he was just kind of like actually, repaired his reputation somewhat, I think, with that. And so he did a really good job. But I just don't like the idea of him in the band. It just goes against that cool closed shop thing, that interesting thing where you get a Brian Johnson in, or you get a Stevie Young in, and everybody seems, or even you get a Bon Scott in at the very beginning. Everything seems like this tight little thing of not famous people that are part of the family and blah, blah, blah. It just was the absolute polar opposite of that. I would love to see, unfortunately, sadly, we're not going to get Dan McCafferty in there, in late years. And obviously he had a COPD situation, and he recently died because of that, essentially. But, I always would have loved to have seen Mark Starachi in there or something like that. Like just someone who was there, maybe smaller, but who could walk in there with their head held high, as saying, I did the same things you guys did. We didn't sell that as many records, but Mark Starachi could have gone in there, and the deep fans would have like said, that's cool, that's a great choice. He is somewhat on par with so Crocus wasn't as famous, big deal. They kind of did the same thing, and they went through all those same steps or whatever. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen just some interesting smaller family choice in there, because Axel is such a huge personality, he's such a distraction. He's literally, he's one of the only guys who could go into ACDC and you could say he's half the band, right?
Yeah, that's true. And that's another chapter you have in the book, which is, I'm glad you brought it up, is ACDC guys that are out there that sound like Bon Scott, and you got Mark from Crocus, as Martin mentioned. I think I forget the fellow's name, Rhino Bucket. I remember him sounding similar to Bon Scott, and a lot of that whiskey drenched vocals. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see.
I forgot about that chapter. Yeah. So and also hopefully I mentioned Rose Tattoo there, and that whole scene. But then definitely Angel City, the Angel City. Love that band. Boy, if I was to rank all these albums together, I'd probably have Darkroom right up there with those 3 ACDC albums. I love Darkroom to death, and Face to Face, and or No Exit. I mean, it's complicated. They do the same thing ACDC does with the weird versions of the albums versus Australia versus North America. But I've often considered them sort of like the thinking man's ACDC, because they sound like ACDC, but the riffs are just a little more variety. And then you've got Doc Neeson at the front, who's basically like a French poet. He's kind of like a literary sort of guy at the front of that band. So they're like the baby ACDC. If the most direct baby ACDC, with the second one probably being Crocus, you would say is the other baby ACDC.
Well, yeah, especially the One Vice at a Time album.
Yeah.
I mean, when Long Stick Goes Boom kicks off that record, you think that intro with the guitars and the bass and the drums and the cymbal smashing, that's right out of ACDC's 101 right there, man. It's like, not being young at the time, it was like, wow, these guys are filling the gap while I wait for another ACDC record. Yeah. So maybe smart business on Crocus's part.
Yeah. It's funny, those Crocus guys, I've interviewed them all. I can't remember their answers, but just in a general sense, I remember them going kind of like, yeah, we loved ACDC. Why not sound like ACDC? It was like so weirdly transparent and obvious. It's like, we love that kind of music. And they had a little bit of we have the same influences kind of thing, but they weren't really that like that. They were like, no, we just loved ACDC. That was kind of cool music. Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. And so the book finishes up basically towards the end, devoting the last chapter to Malcolm and George Young passing on, and the legacy they left behind in regards to the band. Martin, I'd like you to tell us the story of the time you got to interview the one and only Malcolm Young.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So I went to the Toronto Rocks or Molson Rocks or SARS whatever you want to call it, concert here. So it was a big, it's a weird small news story everybody forgets, but there was kind of like a virus, slight pandemic in Toronto, maybe going through the air conditioning systems and community centers or old folks homes or something. But anyways, so there were a few deaths or whatever, and Toronto's tourism was down. And then they came up with this idea, put on this massive concert, and Toronto, and the Rolling Stones always had an affinity for Toronto, and Rush was part of it. Of course, they're from Toronto, and ACDC has always had a connection to Toronto. And so basically they put on this massive concert at Downsview Park, had over 400,000 people. Some people say 500,000 people. And the headliners were Rolling Stones, then ACDC, then Rush, and on down. Justin Timberlake was there notoriously. And, he said it was a mistake. They got booed badly and all this kind of thing. And, but Tea Party, Randy Bachman. Yeah, it was a lot of big bands there. Anyway, so I went to that. And the next day, in a hotel room downtown Toronto, got to interview in person Malcolm. It was great. He was super nice, little tiny guy, short, skinny guy. Got to meet Heather Hiscox from CBC. She was really nice. Big TV personality. And then Angus walking by in the lobby in his like white hotel gown with his little tray of tea. Said hi to Angus. Got some stuff signed by him, Angus, Malcolm, and Brian. But yeah, so that's one of my highlights of ever being interviewing people, and the whole being a rock scribbler guy, because, I guess a lot of people know this. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but most of the time you get interviews with these guys, most of the time it's on the phone. Now it's actually better. Now it's quite often Zoom, right? Yeah. But so the in-person ones are only a small percentage of all those interviews you do. And to get, a guy like that, and him just put me totally at ease. And it was just a super nice little interview, short, but sweet, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes kind of thing. Not a long one.
Yeah. And I also see in the book, you obviously got some stuff signed by him, as well as Angus and Brian John. And that's cool. You can go there, do your job, but also say to him, hey, can I get your John Henry on this record? And he's like, that's great to hear that, he was a real great guy, because to me, he always came across as a guy with an iron fist, so to speak. So when you say that he's short, but mighty, but strong.
Yeah.
You could say, eh?
Yeah. I don't know. Looking at him, I'd be surprised if he was over 100 pounds.
Wow.
He's like so small. Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And then of course the book closes with the current release, Power Up, which gets some more Mike Fraser quotes. And that album to me is a pretty good ACDC album. It came out during COVID. Nobody was touring. I guess ACDC obviously didn't get out to tour, but good on them for putting out some new product while we were just dying for wrong choice of word. We were starving for music. And, I thought that was a pretty decent album, Through the Mists of Time, which is also another chapter in your book.
Crazy time. I mean, to get an AC/DC album, it didn't seem possible, but there it was.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. And I quite liked it. I don't play it a lot now. One thing that started bothering me about AC/DC a little bit over the years is I felt like there was something kind of missing in terms of going over the wall, in terms of you're using guitar, bass, and drums, distortion pedal all the time, but there's something like lacking in the heaviness over the top. And I notice it a lot on Power Up and even Stiff Upper Lip and those ones in the middle as well. I certainly, but the songs, everything about them that way, I loved way more than Rock or Bust, because that album just really rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know what it was about it. I remember hearing Play Ball as an advanced single and loving it and thinking, oh, this is going to be such a great album. That's a great lead track, advanced single. And then I get the album and I remember going through it and just going, nope, that's okay. Nope, that's okay. And I get to the end of this short album, shorter than Black Ice. And going, man, I like 3 songs on this thing, it's like just something. And that's the funny thing when you make this sort of like, this little origami version of all the AC/DC ingredients over and over again for so many albums. There's just so many things you can do with it, right? Yeah. And eventually there's going to be, they're going to come up with formulas for that specific song that are just not to your taste. right? It's
Yeah.
going to happen, right? And I remember feeling the exact same thing about modern day status quo after 1980. They had the same problem where, but they had both the same problems. They had this this little mathematical formula in a limited space of what you can do with being this boogie band. And then they also seem to really lighten up on the productions where it just felt really behaved in corporate somehow. And no matter how heavy the riff was written, it was never going to sound particularly heavy. And I feel that with Power Up a little bit. It feels like those songs are written heavy enough, but they're not recorded heavy enough.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was just happy, you know, just to get something new.
Yeah.
I know it definitely had some good tracks on it, but like yourself, I haven't listened to it in the last little while. But I remember, you know, getting it on vinyl and thinking, you know what, this is pretty good. It's just good to have them back. It's just good to have them around, period, because there will come that time, right?
Yeah.
So, Martin, want to thank you.
All right.
For coming on and talking about this. But before I let you go, we got to talk about the next one of these that's coming out, which you mentioned at the top of the show, which is Kiss at 50, which I already know is on pre-order at Amazon. It's going to be the same kind of layout, I assume.
Yep, pretty much.
And I can tell you, I'm really looking forward to getting that one. And I think I'll be hitting you up.
Yeah.
Come back.
This whole having it on for pre-sales bothers me because as soon as it goes up, I just constantly am fielding questions. Can I order it from you yet? Right. And it's like, I always tell people, I have the same thing. I always say, it's like, I ain't taking anybody's money until I see heavy boxes sitting across the floor. Like I want it in my office. So when you send me your money for it, I can mail it the next day at the latest, or the next day after that, or whatever. Right. I want to be able to like fulfill the order so it's off of my head. Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I always tell people. And then the other thing I tell people is like, you know, if you want to get it from me, don't reorder it. If you pre-order it, you're not going to get it any faster because I'll physically have it sitting here ready to be able to ship as fast or usually faster than even Amazon or anybody else. Like I'll get my copies to be able to fill your order as fast. So just wait until you get that email from me when I send out to my database. Yeah, it's here. Kind of thing. So,
and it's also supporting you direct, which is
I definitely make more money off of it too, because one of my basically my biggest source of income on any given year is being a mail order guy of my own stuff.
Yeah. And so that book, I believe, is dropping in October.
Yeah, pretty soon. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be here before we know it. So I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on this one. So folks, one more time, hit up Martin's site at martinpopoff.com and push down the click. He's got other books. I know you got a current one with The Cure.
Yeah.
You got Pink Floyd, you got David Bowie, you got, you know, you go outside, you're just not the hard rock box. You're expanding, and you're obviously writing about bands that you like as well. So everybody check out Martin's stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again, Derek.
All right, pal. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks everybody for watching this episode of Distortion Den with my special guest, the one and only Mr. Martin Popoff. You folks have a good day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.